We have got a bit of a stretch of easier lessons coming up here because we spend so much time right away at the beginning of the year with solving equations using inverse operations. And the next two lessons really deal with two properties that we've already been using. And then 3 lessons from now, we're just applying it. It's one of those more lessons where we get a little bit more complicated with the equations. But here we've got the additive property of equality. You'll see it in a box in your lesson. Our properties are usually in boxes. And what it basically says that if A equals B, so in other words, if two variables or unknowns have the same value to start off with, it doesn't matter if we add the same thing to both sides, we still are going to be equal. If we were equal to start with, A equaled B, and then we added C to both sides, it's going to still be equal. We changed the value of both sides, but we still have an equation. And that's important to us when we solve equations because it tells us that if we start with something that's an equation, this is like saying A equals B. If this x minus 3 represented A and 12 represented B, we'd say A equals B. And so we can add something to both sides and it's still going to be an equation. And that something is going to be the inverse operation of negative 3 here. So we ask ourselves, what are we doing to poor little x? We're subtracting 3. How do we undo that? We would add 3 to both sides. Because what we do to one side, we do to the other. That's like adding C to both sides. So we started with A equals B. If we could picture this as A, and this is B, we had A equals B, and then we just added C to both sides. And all we're doing is using the property that we just learned. Oops, got a little carried away there. So, I know we've been doing this before. We've now got x equals 15. The beauty of equations, we can go back in and plug it in to see if it's true. Our original equation was x minus 3 equals 12. Does 15 solve that? Is 15 minus 3 12? Yes, it is. We know we did it right. Doesn't get much more complicated in the lesson. We simply have fractions here. But the point is simply still we've got an equation, so if we add the same thing to both sides, and really when we say add the same thing, we could also be subtracting the same thing. It's just adding the opposite or adding a negative. So here we start with x plus 1/4 equals negative 3/8. So do we have x by itself? No, that's our goal. We want to get x by itself. What are we doing to poor little x? We are adding 1/4. How do we undo that? We subtract 1/4. What we do to one side, we do to the other. I've got the football game on, and Peyton Manning just threw his first interception of the year. He has 19 touchdown passes now and 1 interception. Pretty amazing. Back to math. Positive 1/4 and negative 1/4 cancel out. I'm going to move these off to the side here because I do need a common denominator. Minus 1/4 is the same thing as minus 2/8. So that makes it a little easier for me to see. So I've got negative 5/8. Oops. X equals negative 5/8. So, solving equations. We have been doing this already. We just basically gave a name to one of the properties we were using. The additive property of equality says that if we start with an equation, for example, A equals B, if we add the same thing to both sides, we still have an equation. We use that to solve equations using our inverse operations.